What is the darkest thing that Luke Skywalker has ever done? This is a question that most people don't often consider, but in Legends continuity, Luke is seen as a bastion of hope and courage. He is the champion of the Force, a symbol of what one can accomplish when they fully devote themselves to the path of the light. Using the Jedi teachings given to him by Obi-Wan and Yoda, he is almost always unfaltering in his convictions, and yet, he still is very human. Despite being what some would consider the pinnacle of what a Jedi could achieve, even Luke Skywalker has his limits, and the day when his beloved wife was taken from him, that is when his limit was reached. In today's holocron, we are going to discuss the moment that Luke temporarily laid down his badge as a Jedi and gave wholly himself over to pure vengeance, an act which may just be Luke Skywalker's darkest deed, and the darkest moment from the Grandmaster in all of the lore. But before we open our holocron, our mystics have foreseen even more dark deeds on the horizon. Many who are watching today have not yet subscribed. If you enjoy hearing about lesser known moments in the lore and want to hear more analysis on them, then be sure to force crush that subscribe button. But now, Acolytes, let us begin. The setup of this moment is the death of Mara Jade Skywalker. In the Legacy of the Force, which takes place in 40 ABY, Mara Jade would die by the hand of Jacen Solo. Jacen, who had recently been manipulated by the Dark Lady Lumaya and was becoming Darth Kaitis. As a brief recap, Lumaya has been a thorn in Luke Skywalker's side for decades at this point. Originally, she had been an assassin to the Emperor, trained by Lord Vader. She had then gone undercover in the Rebel Alliance and had earned everyone's trust with the singular goal to get close, kill, or, if she couldn't kill him, ostracize Luke Skywalker. She had even gained Luke's trust and become one of his close friends. But during a mission where the two of them had stolen TIE fighters, they were in the midst of a battle, and the Force alerted Luke to imminent danger. Acting on instinct, he would end up shooting down Lumaya's TIE. She survived this crash, but was horrifically scarred and disabled from it, requiring cybernetics that would save her life, making her very similar to her master Vader. But upon her return, she had trained in the ways of the Sith using holocrons and fashioned herself a light whip. At first, Luke did not truly believe that Lumaya was of the dark side. He had known her as a friend of the rebellion and of himself, and refused to accept that that had all been a lie. Time and time again, he attempted to reason with her and offered her mercy, hoping that there was some good left within her, and that she was not a Dark Lady of the Sith. But she revealed that Luke Skywalker had caused her more pain than anyone else in the entire galaxy, and because of that, it was now her life's mission to bring Luke that same level of pain, and with that pain, a promise to end his life. All of this comes to a conclusion when she exercises her master plan, corrupts Luke's nephew to the dark side, resulting in the death of Mara Jade. The Jedi Grandmaster was inconsolable in this moment. He would feel all the reasons why the Jedi had forbidden marriage and attachment in the past. During her funeral, Luke was despondent, and his grief overwhelmed him. All evidence pointed to Lumaya being the murderer of his beloved wife. And so, without fully thinking it through, the Grandmaster went after her. We'll go ahead and skip to their final meeting, which happened on the world of Terrafon. Before heading out, Luke was aware that he was not in a proper state of mind to run and govern the Jedi Order, and so he temporarily surrendered his position as leader of the Council to Corran Horn. The Council all knew that this would be a trap, and the rest of the Council offered to go with him or even in Luke's stead, but he wasn't hearing any of it. So he took a stealth ex-Jedi starfighter and went to face down Lumaya himself. In orbit above Terrafon, Luke's mind was scarily clear. He was resolute in what he had decided to do, and he planned on murdering Lumaya right then and there. As he sat, his mind would not come to grips that Mara Jade was truly gone. In fact, he refused to even miss her until he got closure and defeated the person responsible. As he sat there waiting, he thought about how Mara used to say he bent over backwards to see the good in people. But then Luke had responded, "I won't be trying too hard today." In fact, not at all. His thoughts had already turned dark, and he was no longer acting in character of the Grandmaster, something that grief often does to people. But for Luke, who was supposed to be the Paladin of the Light, this was terrifying. He then spotted Lumaya's ship waiting for him above the world. As she told him over the comm that she saw no point in running, it was time for them to finish this. For the briefest of moments, Luke considered firing a killing shot. He had perfect targeting clarity. It would be easy, but Luke refused. He remembered how she had survived her injuries before and returned as a cybernetic monster. No, this time she would die for good. Luke needed to watch her die. He needed to do it himself. When her ship turned around and went toward the planet, he followed her closely. Lumaya then accelerated her ship to the maximum speed of its sublight thrusters, straight towards the planet in what felt like a crash dive. Noticing this, Luke said this: "Oh no, Lumaya, you don't get away with a suicide run. You're mine." The bloodthirst was now fully present with Luke, and he would use his ship's tractor beam to force the ship to slow down, to pull Lumaya away from the world. Taking the hint, Lumaya decelerated. The two warriors would finally land on one of the sky-high plateaus of the world, and finally exit their ship and face one another. Luke held only his lightsaber in his two hands, and Lumaya would draw her light whip for the very last time. From this point forward, we'll be reading directly from the book, and add our own annotations when necessary. This is how the moment goes. He knew the light whip by now. He'd relied on the Shoto as an extra weapon in the past to counter the whip's twin elements of matter and energy, but he was flooded with a new confidence that he could take her with just the lightsaber that he had always had, the one that had always stood between him and darkness. Holding it in two hands over his head, he rotated it slowly, stalking around her. This is a fascinating stance for Luke. Holding the saber two-handed over his hand and slowly rotating it is the aggressive style opening stance of Form 5 Xi'an. This is the exact same stance and movement that Anakin used against Dooku on Geonosis. It's almost as if he's channeling his own father's rage in this moment, mirroring the days when Anakin began his own journey with the dark side. But let's continue. Lumaya raised her arm to flick the whip, and to get the momentum for the forward stroke, and then she cracked it, sending forks of dark energy crackling into the ground at his feet, making him jump back before he sprung forward again and brought the lightsaber around in a right-to-left arc that she parried with the whip's handle. He leapt out of range, and the whirling tails again and again. Then she paused, and he edged closer again. "You hate me that much?" he asked. "I don't hate you at all. You killed her. You killed Mara. Nothing personal." She looked as if she was smiling, but the movement was around her eyes, rather her cybernetic mouth. "Just doing what I swore an oath to the Emperor I would always do, to serve the dark side. Oaths matter, Luke. They are all that you're left with in the end." She then drew back her arm and brought the light whip crackling through the air, missing Luke by centimeters. He lunged at her again and again, driven back each time. She'd slow sooner or later though, but so would he. Then, as he began to raise her arm again, he ran at her, so close that she couldn't see the whip traveling at its maximum lethal speed. He forced her back, step by step, as she tried to maintain the distance that she needed. 1, 2, 3, 4. She blocked him, handle held this way, then that, using the whip like a short lightsaber to deflect him. But Luke did not pause. He did not shift direction to wrong foot her. He drove her like a battering ram towards the edge of the mesa, pushing her within meters, then a step of the edge. This is a scary moment for the Grandmaster. He is actually unleashing real emotion. He doesn't use fanciful footwork or feints to try to throw her off. He's not using the collected and measured way of a Jedi, approaching combat the way that he always has. This is different. He is advancing forward, giving himself over to Form 5, bulldozing his opponent. He's described as a battering ram, charging her down, disregarding her own attempts to parry. This is Luke fighting like Anakin, driving his momentum forward, refusing to be diverted off of course by anything less than brute force. And because of Lumaya's weapon, brute force is not something afforded to her. But this moment is even more worrying because of just how many values Luke is compromising. When teaching in his Jedi Praxium, Luke essentially built his new Jedi code off of the teachings of Yoda. One of the biggest teachings being, a Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack. This is a sentiment that Luke echoes time and time again when teaching all of his students, telling them to use restraint, temperance in battle. But all of that is gone. Right now he's not fighting like a Jedi, he's fighting as a widower. But this is what Lumaya wants. She desires for Luke to be driven towards aggression, to the dark side. It's why she's taking credit for killing Mara Jade. But this is how their duel concludes. Lumaya held the whip handle in both hands like a staff, and blocked his downward sweep. For a moment they were locked in a stalemate, pushing against each other, grunting with effort, with only the sounds of exertion, because now they had nothing left to say to each other. Her rear foot began to slide backwards as she struggled for purchase. The edge of the mesa was cracked and fissured. The smooth glittering stone began to now crumble. Luke reached out though, and caught her hand as she fell. Whip, tumbling, and bouncing down the steep rock face into deep, dark oblivion. The Jedi then leaned back, and all his weight put on his knees, knuckles clenched white with the strain of holding her weight. And for a second, he wanted to see her face dwindling as she fell to her death, her mouth open in a scream. But that wasn't the way that he would end this. "I'd never let you fall," Luke said, and pulled her back to safety. As she straightened up, he looked into her eyes, calmly, eerily calm, and swung his lightsaber in a single decapitating arc. Now, he could finally breathe again. For just a moment it appears as though Luke has pulled himself back from the dark side, that he remembers the ways of forgiveness, serenity. But it is calmness that is not in the way of Jedi compassion now. It is resolute intention. He would not allow her to go down in a blazing fall from his own ship's cannons. He would not allow her to impact the planet's surface at full speed of her own doing. He would not even allow her to fall an unknown number of stories into a bottomless chasm. Luke had to do it himself. He had to look into her eyes, feel the tangibility of his lightsaber being driven through metal, flesh, and bone. He needed to know that she was dead, and he had to do it himself. The scene uncomfortably reminds me of Luke's vision on Dagobah when he decapitates Lord Vader. In this situation, Luke waited. He saved her twice just so that he could cold-heartedly execute her. And the worst part about it all was, she was innocent of the crime. She was a dark lady of the Sith that needed to die, perhaps, but in the way that Luke did it was very un-Jedi-like, compromising to everything the Grandmaster stood for. It would only be after he ended her life that Luke would realize what he had done. He felt through the Force that Lumaya had somehow gotten the better of him, that Lumaya had achieved what she wanted, and it wouldn't take long for the Grandmaster to realize that Jason was always the true culprit. When this dawned on him, Luke was put into even more distress. He realized that he had completely failed as a Jedi. He had acted out of vengeance, out of despair. And from that point forward, he washed his hands of the entire situation. He vowed that he would never fight Jason directly, nor would he be the one to kill him in the end. Luke no longer trusted himself to take care of the situation, and so he had a heart-to-heart with Jaina, telling her that she had to be the one to kill Jason. This event is an absolutely chilling one. At some point, Grandmaster Luke crossed a threshold in power where losing control was simply out of the question for him. By this point, it would be the equivalent, or worse than Yoda losing control. His power was so great that if it were ever turned towards darkness or evil, there would be nothing that could stop him. We covered this scenario recently in a video a while ago, where we discussed that a Dark Grandmaster is the worst nightmare any Sith could face. Jason would later get merely a taste of Luke's unrestrained power and find himself shaking in his cape. As humble as Luke Skywalker was, he is aware of the extent of his power, and is very realistic about how he needs to approach his own emotions because of it. With this being the darkest deed he ever committed as the Grandmaster, it taught Luke much about attachment, how truly dangerous it was when one was in grief, and when that grief was unchecked. It made him feel like his father. I feel as though Jedi giving into the dark side, tapping into some unknown power, is treated as a grandiose way of modern storytelling. But with Luke, both on the second Death Star and in this situation, it's heartbreaking. He doesn't unleash a force storm of power, becoming the living embodiment of shadow and chaos. He's just a man fighting with the fury of having the woman he loves taken from him. This manifests as him ruthlessly determining to end his foe with nothing but his bare hands and his lightsaber. It's a raw emotional moment where flashes of Anakin flicker across the entire image. It's the moment that Shmi Skywalker limply falls out of Anakin's arms, leading him to slaughter every man, woman, and child in the Tusken Raider camp. It's the moment Darth Vader rips himself off the operating table and screams out into the night, facing the reality of what he has done, that Padme is dead. This is Luke Skywalker's equivalent, a terrifying fulcrum on which his destiny rests between the light and the dark side. It's only because Luke refuses to make the mistakes of his father does he pull himself back to take his hands off of the situation entirely. It is his darkest deed, one of his most defining moments in the lore, the moment he gave in and truly connected with his father's ghost. But as always, my friends, thank you so much for stopping by the archives today. And what are your thoughts on the death of Mara Jade Skywalker and the vengeance of the Grandmaster, his darkest deed? As always, may the Force be with you, and I hope that you're having an incredible day.